Welcome to a special early summer edition of Gridiron Central. Yes, there's really not that much football to talk about, but then again, there is. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in the spring football games, just a little bit. A lot of spring sports ended up taking us away from spring football games. We're going to talk about 4 or 5 things to watch out for, not only over the summer, but as we head into that first week of the season, the first weeks of the season in late August. With me, as always, my tag team partner going on 3, 4, I can't even remember how many years now, Matt Davis from 95.7 The Ridge, the voice of high school football over there. Matt, obviously we're about 3 months away from the start of the 2013 season, but you know, just a real quick thing, what's on your mind over the next 2 or 3 months?
Oh man, can it get here any quicker? Because I'm ready. No, a lot is on my mind actually, and I talk to a lot of people about these kind of things, you know, frequently throughout the summer because there's so much anticipation when you got a new, year of high school football coming around the corner. And I know some of the things we're going to talk about today relate to the area teams and who we think is going to emerge as the next great team in the area or whatnot. And those are the questions that pop into your mind at this point. And so for me, and most of the discussions I have with my friends that keep up with this kind of stuff is just kind of scratching your head saying, I don't know, because the way things went last year, I guess particularly for 7AA football, which most of our area teams, are a part of, I don't know which team's going to emerge. I can kind of speculate on that, and I think that some of that speculation will end up being correct. But at the same time, I think there'll be some surprises that come along with that. And that's one of the reasons why, whether you played football as a youth or not, at some point or another, it seems like everybody wants to get involved and be a part of what's going on with football because it's so exciting. And I didn't play football, when I was in high school, but I love keeping up with it for those reasons because you just never know what's going to happen from year to year. And some teams, you kind of feel like you do, and then some surprises will come along the way. So I guess my thoughts are on, what's going to go on in 7AA football and what are going to be some of the surprises this year, who's going to step up, those kind of things.
Definitely. Well, we'll go ahead and start talking about it. I came up with 5 things to watch. Matt will probably tell me I'm wrong about half of these, but that's okay. We disagree quite often. We'll start off with a guy that's been in the news quite a bit, Nick Chubb, the rising senior running back at Cedartown, who last week was supposed to commit to whichever school he's going to. Obviously, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, amongst a slew of other schools mentioned as the possible destination for Mr. Chubb. He delayed that decision. Brad Easterwood from the Cedartown Standard, one of our newspapers, reported that last week. We're not sure when Chubb is going to commit. The thing we do know is last year he rushed for over 2,700 yards. He's coming back as a senior. To me, he is going to be one of the players to watch. And not only him, but how is Cedartown going to react? Last year's Cedartown team, not as good as we thought it was going to be. Defense wasn't there. The offense, minus Nick Chubb, really was not as good. They did not make the playoffs. I think Nick Chubb is going to be a big story, but I think the bigger story there is going to be, can Cedartown build up a defense and an offense around him to possibly make a charge at a region title in the playoffs?
I think there's every indication there that Nick Chubb is going to have another big year this year. I think the main thing with him is, last year he had a ton of attention. Everybody was looking at him, all eyes on Nick Chubb. And when you looked at the numbers that he put up and, just the kind of kid that he is, it's obvious why everybody's after him. And so this year, if you thought last year was the circus, imagine what it's going to be like this year with him undecided and not totally committed to going one place or another. It's going to be an absolute zoo. So the things that I could see hindering him from having the productive year that he had last year this year would be the intensified pressure of having a huge year like he had last year, trying to live up to that, and at the same time having all these outside pressures there from all these big schools and all the media and all those sorts of things with their eyes on you. How does he hold up to that? And, based on what we've seen so far, I think he's got a pretty strong head and he'll be able to handle those sorts of things. And so for me, when I watch this process, once he gets through this year, imagine how ready he's going to be for the experience he's going to have next year from going through what he's gone through the last couple of years. So I think it's going to be, an awesome year to watch him, and it's going to be fun to see who ends up going with. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, so hopefully he'll end up in a Bulldogs uniform, but we'll have to see what happens. But that's going to be one of those storylines that makes this year of high school football special for this general area.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. I'll be very interested to watch that. I think, and I think if you were to ask Nick about, number one, the college choice, I think the college choice will be nailed down before the season starts, just from things he said before. Again, that's just my gut feeling. But the secondary thing there is I think Nick Chubb would have no problem not going after 2,700 yards if it meant that Cedartown had a 10-0 season, was able to make a deep run in the playoffs. And maybe if they can build up the offense, they may not have to rely on him that much. Nick Chubb's going to be one of the individual stories to watch out for. And, of course, one of the key things we ask every year on this show, even back from its founding 6 years ago, is which team from 7AA is going to step up and be that breakout team. Last year, the Model Blue Devils did. They got the number 3 seed into the playoffs, lost in the first round of the playoffs, but that was their first playoff appearance in forever and a day. This year, you go into it, I look at everything. I guess I'm going to ask Matt first. I'll tell you who I think is going to be the breakout team. But Matt, who do you think will be the breakout team from 7AA?
Well, we'll have to see. I think all indications are heading towards Coosa, and I think you're more than likely going to agree with that because you follow it as closely as anybody I know. But last year, Coosa had a really talented team, and they had a few games where they performed extremely well, but they lacked a certain kind of consistency because when you would go see them play, one day they'd be lights out, and then the next game, it'd be like, well, what happened? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, this year they're going to have a new head coach, and that's going to be one of the things to really watch with this is how do they gel under their new system of having Todd Wheeler as their head coach. And, one good thing there is he's been there for a little while. So they're already familiar with him, and it's not like he's new to football. He's been around it forever and has a tremendous history that everybody around this area knows about, so I'll spare you the details. But I think that could be a really good situation for them, and we'll just have to see what happens. But in terms of talent, from what I saw last year, I would think that Coosa has got a really good talent pool and definitely could do some good things this year.
Well, I'm going to agree with you 100% on this one. I think coming into this year, I look at Coosa. Remember, the kids that are going to be juniors on this Coosa team were all part of that Coosa middle school team that played Darlington for the middle school championship back 2 or 3 years ago, lost in an overtime game. That should mean good things for both Coosa and Darlington, as those 8th graders are now rising juniors and are going to be key cogs and components. A lot of those kids played as sophomores at Coosa. Coosa is deep. Their defense got better as the year went on. Their offense got better. They lost their first 5 games last year. I don't think you're going to see that this year. I think Coosa is going to have a much better record. Question for me is, are they going to be good enough to go after Pepperell, who I think is a solid number 2 in 7AA this year and every other year? I'm not going to say they're going to go after Calhoun. No one in 7AA, I think, can go after Calhoun. We'll talk about them in just a second. But I do think Coosa could maybe even challenge Pepperell, try to get that number 2 seed. And, of course, we know with that number 2 seed comes a home playoff game. And that would be huge for Coosa. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that watch out, that I think the Eagles might be that team, just like Model was last year, that rose up and surprised everybody. I think Coosa is going to be that team in 7AA this year. And also, don't overlook Armurchie. I may mention them after a little while. I'm not saying they're going to definitely go after the 3 or 4 spot, but I think Armurchie could be that dark horse team there. Moving on, but staying in Region 7AA, this one, the Calhoun Yellow Jackets. Well, we fought them quite closely here, 5 straight times to the Georgia Dome. Unfortunately, they only have 1 state title to go with that. They still have a regular season winning streak that I believe dates back 4 years now. They have a Region 7AA winning streak that now dates back 11 years, unless I'm badly mistaken. To me, those are the big questions there. The 3 big questions for Calhoun. 1, will the regular season winning streak remain intact? No, it won't. Carrollton ends at 3rd week of the season. Sorry. Write it down. Delivered. Done deal. It may even be 3 touchdowns.
He's ready to get rolling.
Will the region winning streak continue? Yes. Nobody in 7AA is going to beat them. Will they get back to the Dome for a 6th straight season? I'm going to let you answer that one. I'll say my opinion in just a second.
Nothing ever surprises me when it comes to Calhoun.
Yeah.
You have a situation this year where you lose your quarterback that you've had for a couple of years, which has been a huge asset for this team. And the question that always comes up when you have that cycle is, what do they do now? Well, what do they do? Every time they enter that kind of cycle, they reload and they find players, that fit what they're trying to do, and it's just there.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any reason to believe that they won't have a good replacement to fill the shoes of Taylor Lamb on this team. I don't know what his name is, but I would imagine that they've got something in place already that they feel is going to be very, very good. And you probably know his name.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I should have done a little bit more research on that, but he's been waiting in the wings for a couple of years. good, solid player. Play was one of the key cogs on defense last year. If I remember correctly, he's the guy that got hurt in the state semifinal game that really Calhoun's defense really relied on him, and you kind of saw that in the second half of the semifinal game and throughout the entire state championship game. Do you think they can get back to the Dome?
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see what happens.
Okay.
Do I think that their region record will remain intact? I really don't know that either. I think it's just going to.
Oh, come on.
I mean, I would
Really?
think. Yeah.
Who from 7AA is going to beat them?
I don't.
Really?
I don't see a team that probably can do
Okay,
it.
so
But
that
you know
remains
what?
intact.
I'll be honest with you. You know, being a guy that grew up in Rome, I mean, it wouldn't hurt my feelings to see a little bit of opposition come up for them.
It would be nice.
But do I see a team that I saw last year and what they have coming up that I feel like that could be that team? Probably not, you know, but you never know. I guess stranger things have happened in reality, so we'll see. But I just really expect Calhoun's going to come out and they're going to be the Calhoun that we're used to seeing. Now, does that mean they'll make it to the Dome? I don't know. You know, I thought they would have won the state championship this year, and Jefferson proved otherwise. And I really feel like after watching that game, and I'm probably not going to make any friends by saying this, I felt like the better team won that day. You know, I felt like that quarterback on that team really was the kind of quarterback like a Tim Tebow was in college that really carried that team in a lot of ways and was pretty amazing. And it was obvious from the beginning of that game to the end what team was going to end up winning that game. So I don't know if I'm necessarily saying that I feel like that's the start of a decline for Calhoun. I really don't think that. But to predict that they're going to make it to another state championship, I mean, that's a tough thing to do. You know, it's a tough thing to do, even though they've done it so many years in a row.
I think the biggest thing that took a hit in the state championship game was also from the state semifinal game is the Calhoun mystique got hit. Until last year, really nobody had challenged them except Buford. And last year, the team in the semifinals could have beaten them, and Jefferson did beat them. Those weren't Buford. And I think that's the big thing for me, and we'll talk a little bit about Calhoun in just a minute later on as we talk about first week games. But to me, you know, and again, and of course everybody's going to jump on me for saying this, there's still one dark horse that's going to be waiting out in those brackets, and that's going to be Brooks County. And everybody's going to say, oh, they slaughtered Brooks County. You're right, they did. They played the best game Calhoun played all year. Unfortunately, it was in the third round of the state playoffs. Brooks County has everything coming back, and if there's any team with a chip on their shoulder, it's going to be Brooks County. I have not seen the brackets yet, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, Brooks County could very easily be undefeated and ranked number 1 or number 2 in the state whenever they do meet Calhoun. And that will be, again, probably a closer game than last year for all we know, or maybe Calhoun will take them to the woodshed again. You never know. Speaking of a team that doesn't want to be taken to the woodshed again in the playoffs, we'll move over to Rome High School up in Class 5A. Of course, last year, nice season for Rome, 8-3 overall record, a little deceiving. The 3 losses, by 3 touchdowns to Alatoona, by about 5 to East Paulding, and by 4 or 5 to Gainesville team that went on to win the state title, but who called off the Dogs in the second half. Not saying Rome's not a good team. 2,000-yard rushers coming back. A senior quarterback who has one of the fastest releases I've ever seen in any high school player. A defense that needs to get better. My question here is Rome going to be good enough to start, closing the gap between the Alatoonas, the East Pauldings, and the Gainesvilles of the world? Because that's the thing we haven't seen. Yeah, they can beat the North Pauldings. They can beat the teams, the Woodlands, the teams that aren't supposed to be in the playoffs. But we haven't seen Rome be able to really go out and beat a good, solid team in a couple of years. Can they do that this year?
For me, I'm no offensive expert or mastermind, but the teams that I saw this year on highest levels that had the most success had a good bit of diversity in terms of their offensive attack. And so I think that's one of those things that's key really for any team. And the team that sticks out in my mind this year that I saw that had the most impact on me in terms of that would have been Sandy Creek that played against Ridgeland.
Oh, that was one of the best high school teams I've ever seen.
I mean, they were amazing. I could see that team beating some small college teams without a doubt. I mean, there's no question. They were that good. And watching the way they could throw the ball, run the ball, they could do it in every facet of the game. There's some good teams out there, even though they don't play in the same classification of Rome. But I just bring them up because they're the perfect example of if you were creating this team and that you wanted to be in this area and be successful, you want them to be like that team.
Oh, without a doubt.
And so for me, I'd like to see a little bit more diversity in terms of the offensive attack.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that if Rome can kind of push along, they'll be able to hang with these teams that get out there and they score gobs of points night after night. And sometimes that's what you got to do. And then, of course, people are saying, well, what about defense? You got to have that too.
Yes.
I mean, you've definitely got to step that up. And they let some teams into the end zone a little bit too much in key times this year. And so that's definitely something they'll have to improve on. So I guess I'm saying the obvious. They've got to work on just about everything, but they did have a good year. And I think, for me, I didn't realize they would have a good a year as they ended up having.
No, I didn't think they would be
better than expected.
Yeah.
So they're moving in the right direction. At least it feels that way.
And it's funny too because on my paper I wrote down very similar things. 2 years ago, Rome's defense was really good. The offense was lacking. Last year, the offense was a lot better. The defense was lacking. In the spring, they really talked about, hey, we're going to work on our defense. We're going to work on the rushing game. That's great, but when you play the big teams of the world, you've got to throw the ball. If they can throw 8 to 12 passes a game and the defense is improved as they think it's going to be, Rome could possibly get a home playoff game. If they go back to 2 or 3 passes a game, and then even with an improved defense, I don't think they're going to be good enough to get that home playoff game. I would love to see Rome get a home playoff game. Going to find out later on if that's going to happen.
Another example of that, we were talking about Nick Chubb earlier.
Yeah.
And what a great season he had.
Oh, yeah.
And when you talk about Cedartown football from last year, you hear one name. You hear Nick Chubb in their running game. Well, that Nick Chubb running game got a lot of things done, but it didn't win the amount of games they needed to win to make the playoffs.
No, didn't get them to the playoffs.
And so, you can have the best. So the point I'm trying to make is you can have one of the best running backs in the country, and that doesn't matter if you don't have some diversity. And so that's one of the things that teams have got to strive for.
Exactly. And we know these games are 3 months away, but I'm going to go ahead and break down some games the first week and one in the second week that I think are going to be great to go see. Unfortunately, I doubt we can get to all these for Gridiron, but we'll try our best. Start with Cartersville at Darlington, August 30th, Matt.
That one I don't have a good feel for, and that's one of the things I wanted to mention earlier about, looking towards the upcoming season is one of the biggest question marks that I see, and I have no feel for this, is, what Darlington's going to come out with this year, because they've had 4 years of Brad Butler at quarterback, and the guy was amazing. And, he started more games than anybody I can think of in terms of being a starting quarterback for a team because he started as a freshman and had success, every year. And so after you've had a quarterback that long, what do you do to replace him? Who is his replacement? I don't know. So that's one of the big question marks because those are some big shoes to fill.
Yeah. Well, I also have a lot of question marks about Darlington. I think this can be a statement game for them. Spoiler alert, they're going to get beat by 3 touchdowns. Cartersville has everything coming back from a team that barely lost to Buford in the state semifinals. So I think it's going to be a bloodletting early on. I think Cartersville's going to beat them bad. However, Darlington can go into this game saying, hey, we have nothing to lose. We're going to make a statement. Remember, what I said about Coosa holds the same for Darlington in that the juniors on this Darlington team were on that 8th grade team that won the championship, middle school championship back 2 or 3 years ago. So, there are some good cogs on that team. It'll be very interesting. They have some good athletes out there. I think it'll be a great game. Another game that may not be circled by everybody, Gridiron Central at Coosa.
This is another one of those games that until we get into it, I can't make a prediction. Obviously, Cartersville and Darlington's somewhat cut and dry compared to this one. But as we mentioned, Coosa, they've got a good talent pool coming back. There's going to be a certain level of maturity that comes with that team that maybe they didn't have as much of last year. And they really felt like in some ways, they were kind of heading in the right direction the last couple of years, even though when you look at their record, it wouldn't indicate it. So maybe this is year that Coosa really turns the corner. And if they do, I'm sure that they could compete with a team of Gridiron Central's caliber. But I would have to ask you because honestly, I don't recall what of Gridiron Central's powerhouse from last year is coming back because that's the key.
Not much.
That's really
to me. I think this is again. There are a lot of statement games this first week. That's the reason we're talking about it now. But you have a Gridiron Central team that went to the AAA playoffs last year, but they lost a lot of seniors off that team. You have a Coosa team that went to the AA playoffs last year that really didn't lose hardly anything. You have a Gridiron Central team with a new coach, Coosa team with a new coach. This has statement game written all over it. Gridiron Central saying, hey, yeah, we lost a lot. We're still going to be good. Coosa saying, hey, we're here to stay. We're going to be the breakout team this year, and I think it could be a great game. Game's going to be at Coosa. It's one of several I wish I could be at that night. Another game, it's not often we say this, the state Class AA runner-up versus the Class 4 AA runner-up, Calhoun traveling to Ridgeland. Calhoun, of course, regular season winning streak of 4+ years will be on the line, and this one, Ridgeland has not beaten Calhoun in a long time. This could be a very interesting game, Matt.
It really could be, and it typically has been the last couple of years. So I think there's every indication that it will be again this year. You know, Ridgeland, they've lost some players, you know, due to graduation from the team that was so successful last year. And they're another one of those teams that when I look at them, I say, they're a little too one-dimensional. They rely too heavily on the running game, and when they run into, you know, some major adversity like they did against Sandy Creek, I mean, they just absolutely got blown off the field, and it wasn't pretty. It was tough from the very beginning. I mean, you were there, I was there. We saw it take place, and I had hopes that it was going to be a really interesting game to watch. And so, you know, I don't know. Calhoun is you know, kind of the opposite of that. You know, they usually have a pretty good running game. They always have a quarterback that can throw the ball and have a little bit more diversity. So, you know, even though it could be an interesting game, you know, I'm always going to pick Calhoun in those situations until they prove me otherwise.
Again, I'm going to say it's a statement game, both sides. Ridgeland, if they win this game, they can say, hey, we did not lose as much as we thought, as everybody thought we were. We're still going to be a good team. Of course, Calhoun wants to prove, hey, what happened in the Dome was a fluke. We're still the team to beat in Northwest Georgia, beat Ridgeland. That's definitely what they'll be saying. R. Murchie at Trine, again, they probably won't be circled by too many people, excuse me. This one's always an interesting game for me, especially this year. I think R. Murchie is one of those teams. They did not have a great season last year. They really want to win this game to set the tone. Trine went to the Class A public semifinals and actually played quite good in that. You know, did not make it to the state finals, but, you know, in Trine, I don't know how much we'll have coming back, but again, it'll be a statement game for Trine saying, hey, we're still going to be good and we're making a run again. Again, I think it could be a great game up in Bulldog Country.
Yeah, it could be. You know, R. Murchie, they had a horrible season last year. They really did. And, you know, we all kind of knew going into that season that it was going to be a rebuilding time for them because they had so many good skilled players that they had with Zach Payne and, you know, their quarterback there for several years and some of the other guys that surrounded him in terms of their offense that they lost, that it just wasn't going to be the same team. And honestly, it even kind of surprised me of how downhill it was for them last year. But, you know, it gives them some room to grow. And so this year, you know, I feel like they're going to improve and they're going to try to change some things up and do some things differently. And one of the things that you'll have is you had some young men that went through a tough time last year.
Yes.
And sometimes when you get through some adversity like that, there's some growth that comes along with that. And so I would imagine that Coach Cash, that's going to be one of the things he really hammers home,
Definitely.
you know, throughout this season is, can't get much worse than last year. We got to grow from the problems that we had last year. So I think this is a team that, you know, they may struggle a little bit this year, but maybe not as much as they did last year. I look for them to improve this year a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And R. Murchie, you know, had a tough year last year. I look for them to possibly be one of those teams that could squeeze up in there going after that number 4 seed in Region 7 AA. One last game to talk about is actually in week number 2, September 6th, Cedartown at Pepperell. You know, I think this goes from both sides here. Cedartown, obviously you're going to have the Nick Chubb Express. Pepperell's going to have to shut down. But more importantly, Cedartown's going to want to get out there and prove that, hey, last year we should have been better. We could have been a playoff team. We're going to be a playoff team this year. Pepperell did not have a great record last year. Lost in the first round of the playoffs. Have lost in the first round of the playoffs 5 straight years? I guess just 4. I think the Dragons, I think both of these teams really want to win in this game to show, hey, we're back. We're going to be good. We're better than our rivals over here that aren't too terribly far away, and we're going to make a run at the playoffs. So I think it's going to be a great game for that second week. What do you think?
Well, you know, when I look at Pepperell from last year, yeah, they weren't necessarily one of the great classic Pepperell teams of the past that we saw, but they've been consistently a good team for quite a long time. So I think sometimes, you know, they take a little bit more criticism down there with that program than they should.
Probably
because let's
so.
face it, when you look at 7AA, you know, you talk about Calhoun, we always say they're kind of in a league of their own. And then there's Pepperell, and then there's everybody else. And, you know, for the most part, that's held true over the years. So I think Pepperell takes a little bit too much flack. I mean, they're usually a pretty solid team that has, you know, some good talent. So I never count them out. I mean, I'm not sure individually in terms of looking at their players' names for this year, who all they're going to have. But I know for a fact, you know, they'll put some talented kids on the field, and they're going to win some football games. So we'll see what happens in this one. You're looking at a team that we've already mentioned has one of the best running backs in the country. He's going to be a factor no matter who they play on any given night. So it's going to be a fun game to watch and see how it turns out.
Definitely so, and I'm not ragging on Pepperell by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that last year's record was not what they're doing to have, and it is a proven fact. They haven't run a first-round playoff game in a long time, and usually when you think of Pepperell, you think of a team that can win 8 or 9 games and go a couple of rounds in the playoffs. That's only happened once or twice since Gridiron Central started 6 years ago. And that's a quick wrap-up. Actually, probably a very long wrap-up, long-winded, but that's okay. We're talking a lot of football. And over the summer, we'll do a little bit of coverage. As we head into August, we'll start previewing everything, even up to the exhibition games. And, of course, with Gridiron Central going live right around August 30th as the 2013 season will kick off. Of course, Matt Davis will be with me for all of our Wednesday shows. We'll have our Friday night shows, all the typical coverage at Prep Central Online. Matt, as always, thank you for joining me.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. It's always fun.
And we'll see you on the sidelines in about 3 months.